Welcome into the Husker247 Podcast, Christmas Eve edition. I'm Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson over there. We're killing time as the Oregon State Beavers try to run out the clock in Hawaii. Currently delaying Nebraska basketball playing the semifinals of the Diamond Head Classic, but plenty to hit on today, late tonight. We'll hit some portal. We'll talk a little bit of bowl game now that Nebraska is officially in the Big Apple, doing all that stuff. So plenty to cover. Brian, first off, how's it going? Is the shopping done? Mine is not, and I'm still not too stressed about it yet, though.
Yeah. So no, I'm not done. I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to incriminate myself because I think I've implied that I am done within my house. So don't send this to my wife. No, there's one more thing I need to go get to kind of tie. It's like a Big Lebowski. I need that one thing to tie the room together. It's like the rug of my gifts. So, it's not a rug, by the way. But I do have one item in mind to finish it. That's better than I usually am at this point. So,
well, that's positive. So let's just get into it. And if you're out driving around, sharpen those elbows for the last minute Christmas shopping, and we'll take you through the work that Nebraska's done in the transfer portal so far and what they've got left to do. As it stands on Monday night at 9:15 Central, Nebraska sits at 9 incoming transfers in the transfer portal. Still a couple big decisions yet to be made as of this recording out there. So I guess let's just start. I know I wasn't on the last podcast. I know you and Schaefer covered a little bit of ground, but there was kind of a run of commitments late in the weekend. You talked to Marcos Davila. I'm kind of intrigued there with the quarterback transfer from Purdue. I think anytime you get a quarterback transfer, it's worth talking about. I think especially whenever you have somebody that's seemingly as entrenched as Dylan Raiola is. What did you kind of make of that, and what kind of happened in that conversation about why Nebraska for him?
You probably got this question on different radio appearances over the last month, Bruntz, about like, what do they do at QB? Like, what's the fit there? How do they work that, with Raiola? And I never had a great answer until it actually happened, until the name was in front of you and you saw it. And I was like, that's the perfect answer. And I'm not saying it's because he's the one who committed, but Marcos had been recruited by Dana Holgorsen and liked him a lot, almost flipped to him at Houston. In fact, stuck with his Purdue commitment, but he darn near flipped. So the first thing he said to me during our interview when I was like, well, what kind of made your decision? He's like, well, first off, Dana's there. Like, yeah, I mean, that was the obvious, but then he took the visit. It was Monday of last week, and he started talking ball with Glenn Thomas, and just two West Texas boys hitting it off. And I think had a real good time. Thought, like, I like how this guy teaches. I know I like Dana Holgorsen. He knows the deal. He knows Dylan Raiola, I think, is QB1 right now. But I liked his mindset. He's like, I'm going to go push him. It's going to make Dylan better. It's going to make the team better. It's going to make me better. That was sort of his takeaway quote. And so it was like a 5-minute talk. I don't want to act like I know the guy inside and out, but you were impressed in listening to him and communicate like sort of his mission and not being afraid to step into a situation where, there is a guy who's sort of the headliner right now. But I think understanding I could be needed very quickly. We all know, and we're knocking on wood. We don't want injuries or anything like that, but we all know that QB is a position where very rarely do you go without having to see the second guy at some point for some snaps that are important. So he could step into a really big role. I think it's a really nice replacement for Danny Kalen, who ended up at Virginia. Obviously, Harburg is transitioning to play more tight end now. You got TJ Lateef, who is on the bowl. He's at the bowl site actually with the team. He's one of the early enrollees who went out there to New York. So I think that's good for him because he can take in like what it's like on the sideline and, watching the prep and all that stuff. So I feel a lot better about the QB situation this week than, a week or two ago. You just feel like it's sort of a little bit more settled with everything.
It's interesting, like just from a college resume point of view. I mean, it's not much of a difference from Danny Kalen, like Marcos didn't play a college snap at Purdue last year. Danny Kalen also did not. So, it's interesting that, kind of the, when you're being asked about this on the radio, and I was too, it was kind of like, what does the profile of this guy look like that would, come in and want to back up Dylan Raiola? And it's in my head, I was always thinking like, well, you're probably looking for somebody that's probably similar to Daniel Kalen. Like you're looking for somebody with some talent that can come in and play and, win if you need him to. But you're also looking for somebody that's a class behind, somebody that kind of understands what's going on there. And, to me, I mean, he's incredibly productive from his high school career. I mean, there's no doubt about that. He was an all-American Bowl quarterback as well. But it's funny how, I mean, there was very much a type that was going to have to come in and fit in that role. And Nebraska found him. I mean, thanks to those connections with Dana Holgorsen, like you said.
Davila is a 4-star recruit and threw for more than 9,000 yards. He won 3 district titles, and he was in the highest level of Texas. Like he was down there in the heart of it. When you think of like Friday Night Lights country, he's of that stock. So like he's used to, big games that where it means a lot, and there's a lot of passion around it. Obviously, it's elevated at the college level, but he thinks that can help him. And I think he understands sort of how Dana Holgorsen operates and sort of his no-nonsense, to-the-point style, where he's not going to mess around with what he's telling you. It's just, here it is. Take it. It's on the plate. And he likes that. He said he knows he's a guy who's not going to lie to him or anything like that. He trusts him. So he's already got a good connection, it feels like, with the coaches. He's going to get going in January, so you're going to have Latif and him here. I just think it's a really good setup. The one advantage is with Dylan, you don't have to really talk around it. He feels like he's someone who is a 3-year college football guy. And so it's not going to be extended forever. So some guys who are in the program can see like a light at the end of the tunnel as far as them playing too, or, maybe being the starter at some point down the line. But I don't think guys like Davila think of it that way. They think of like, I'm going to go compete. I trust my skill set. Let's see what happens. And you never know what's going to happen within a season. I could be really important very quickly at this program. And I think he sees that possibility.
I mean, we saw that last year. I mean, you're lunging for a first down late in a game, and you take a helmet to the back, and all of a sudden, everything looks different really fast. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's as far as the quarterback room can kind of be in the era of 105-man roster, and also with just the portal being the way it is. I mean, it lines up fairly well, I think, for Nebraska, where you've got Raiola, you've got Davila, you've got TJ Latif coming in, potentially Jalen Gramstad too, is kind of that savvy veteran guy that's around if you need him to. I mean, I can't imagine there's going to be a ton of college programs that are going to be carrying 5 scholarship quarterbacks nowadays with the way things are.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I always stress. Like, I know whatever team you follow, you always think like, oh, it's different here. We're not as stocked as we should be compared to how it is elsewhere. But if you actually look elsewhere at their quarterback rooms, there's going to be a lot of programs that have that like second or third guy where it's kind of like, I don't know. It's a little iffy. Like, we'll see how it goes if they get called on. That's just the way you have to probably go into a season nowadays. So the fact that you have a couple of 4 stars, Latif has been up, in that range too. That there's some good talent to work with. I think that if you're Glenn Thomas, you probably look at all 3 of those guys, your QBs, and you see like, these aren't guys picked out of the alleyway or anything. These are guys who were in Elite 11 consideration or at those camps. And I know in Marcos Davila's case, I remember Andrew Ivins wrote this. I don't think he was an Elite 11 finalist, but they did a roundtable and he said, who's the one guy who you wish wouldn't have been left off that should have been there? You would have liked to seen what he did. And Marcos was his guy for, so I just think there's a lot of intrigue about what he could do, especially under the tutelage of Dana and Glenn Thomas.
Yeah, it's interesting. The quarterback room, I mean, you mentioned just kind of the level that he's played at. I mean, Latif played in Southern California in probably one of the toughest leagues in the entire country in terms of, teams and competition that he has to face week in and week out. I mean, it's a group that should not be wide-eyed or, cowered by what they're seeing, bright lights wise, at Nebraska. So I don't know if that's an advantage. It feels like it might be, but those three are going to be your main guys there, with Heinrich Harburg moving over to tight end. And you're allowed to kind of make that move, I think, a little bit more comfortably than maybe what you would have this time last week. A couple other additions, a big one, in my opinion, and the wide receiver spot was one that Nebraska had to land at least one or two guys during the portal cycle to bring in and kind of replace what they're losing, and I think also to kind of add some competition. As of now, Isaiah Hunter from Cal, wide receiver, 6'2", 210, is already signed and announced. Nebraska's still waiting on a decision from Kentucky transfer Dane Key. He was in over the weekend. Georgia, Nebraska, I think Illinois is kind of hanging around there as well. That's one that we still don't know of as of now, but Hunter's kind of an intriguing piece there, and I think a guy that Nebraska really was trying to get in the boat, just based off of, not only body size, like I said, 6'2", 210, but also a guy that's been really productive early in his college career too.
Yeah, nice compliment when you think about a guy the same age, basically, in Ja'Cory Barney. Different sizes, but basically similar stats in a lot of ways. Like, they were sort of in that, 40 to 50 catch range or whatever. I don't know what Isaiah Hunter ended up with, somewhere around there, where he just was a consistent, like there's a drumbeat of consistency with his stats. If you look at it, like 2 or 3 catches every game, at least, almost. So I think that's pretty impressive for a freshman. You get those 3 years of eligibility. Now, I understand people kind of wave their hand at that now because they're like, we'll see every year. You got to see if you can keep guys around. But if you can get a guy with 3 years and hope you can develop them and keep them in your program, why not? So that's a cool part of that one. Seems like a confident guy, had some good options on the table. And I feel like he was one of Nebraska's top targets along with Dane Key. So we'll see what happens with Key. The fact that Nebraska is going toe-to-toe with Georgia, however it falls, and some people, by the time they're listening to it, maybe the domino will have seen where it went. But the fact they're right there at this moment, I think tells you that Nebraska is giving them a lot to think about. Obviously, Da'Keel Shorts was Dane Key's coach, and I have to think Da'Keel Shorts was very appealing to Isaiah Hunter too, just like a guy who has had a lot of success as a young coach with receivers already. I think guys are kind of drawn to him.
What do you make of that wide receiver group? Like, as it is right now and what you have coming back? I mean, is there more that needs to be added, in your opinion, beyond what's out there? Or is it a group that you feel okay about, given, I mean, there's been a lot of guys, a lot of the young guys leaving out of that group, but also some guys that have played a fair number of snaps for Nebraska so far.
Don't you see it as you want at least 2, and if they happen to find a third or something somewhere along the line and another one of it feels like there's almost like 3 phases to this winter portal session, and we're just kind of ending the first one. So maybe there will be another guy who pops up, even if you get 2. But you need at least multiple guys to come in, I think, to push the competition. Obviously, you're going to be without Naor and Banks. There's a couple of, there's some freshmen who left who I think were kind of lost behind the scenes and frankly weren't in the mix as much. There's some updates on some guys I need to, like, I don't know what if Demetrius Bell or what's going to happen with him. He's coming back from that injury. But he was an interesting prospect. And then Jalen Lloyd is the guy that we were really fired up about going into
hold all the stock. What do I do with all this Jalen Lloyd stock?
I think you got to hold that stock now and see if maybe like on December 28th you start to get some payments there. And you're like, okay, I'm gonna push this into 25 because he's a guy I think still got to be important for this operation. And Carter Nelson, whether they want to have him as a tight end, receiver, a hybrid, whatever, I expect we're going to see more of him in this bowl game, and that's just sort of going to get the ball rolling toward him being a regular sort of in the rotation in 25.
Yeah, well, and you got Barney, you've got Cortez Mills, who was tearing it up in the the Broward, I forget what the other county is, but the All-Star game that they have down there. Vincent Shavers did quite well in that last year, and we kind of saw it. It was like a preview, I guess, of what you were going to get when he got to Nebraska. Mills was kind of doing the same thing, really kind of standing out among a pretty talented group. So I have a hard time believing that he's not going to be a part of the offense. I mean, I think he's going to fit right in, in that group pretty well. So
Quinn
Clark's around. Yeah, he traveled a few times towards the end of the year. I think they really like him as kind of that just, big body monster that can go up and win jump balls, and kind of, I think what they had hoped Jamal Banks would have been last year.
Was he Dana's young kid that he liked? Did we ever get clarification on that? We need to just ask him next time. Who was the young kid you liked? He probably forgot.
Yeah, he popped up on the travel roster all of a sudden, right?
Yeah, it had to be him.
Yeah, I'll go with Quinn Clark as the positive young guy. I think that's probably a strong bet there. Two more quick ones on defense. Nebraska over the weekend got former Georgia safety Justin Rhett, and then Oklahoma linebacker Dasan McCullough, who I think I'm very intrigued by what he can be in a John Butler defense. If for no other reason, it seems like there's not really one place where it's like, this is absolutely what he's going to slot in and do. A guy that was very productive at Oklahoma, battled some injuries last year, played their cheetah position, which I guess is kind of like a hybrid defensive back linebacker. I think that kind of athleticism is very intriguing in whatever this defense is going to be to me.
That's a cool position to play. First off, like,
cheetah,
you're at a party and some girl asks you, what do you play as? Like, I'm the cheetah. I'm the cheetah.
I think you're probably obligated to wear just like cheetah print everywhere though, right? Like you're wearing like a silk cheetah shirt.
You just
go party out in Norman.
Yeah. So that had to be
so exotic.
That had to be a tough part of leaving OU, is giving up the cheetah. He'll have to talk John Butler into changing some terminology around here. Stop going with this boring Jack stuff. But yeah, he's 6'5", 235. So that's a frame where you could do about everything. You mentioned the injury. It was like a toe injury, I believe, wasn't it? And so he played only like 7 games. But if you look at some of his best outings, it was that OU Alabama game that everybody knows about, because we've been
heard a little bit about that this week. I think
beat over the head by this weekend about Alabama's loss to OU. But so McCullough had a big say in that. Like, he's a big part of this. He had 5 tackles, but if you go look at a couple of plays he had in that game, like he was just a dude. And so
grown-ass man plays.
Yeah, he's got a big time ceiling. There's no question about that. And I know people like roll their eyes. I hear that all the time. But if you go watch some of the biggest competition that he's played against, he has shown up in those games. And if he can have a healthy season, he's a really exciting piece to work with. And so if you were ranking, like, how excited are you about these additions? Some people would probably have him like number 1 or 2, and I wouldn't blame him for that because I do think he's so versatile.
Linebacker was like a sneaky important position, I think, for Nebraska to nail down in this, like at least start the process in this first kind of portal wave.
You can't underestimate how valuable John Bullock was this year. He was one of the most consistent parts of the defense. Mekhi Bayer was solid. He was just very solid. And so he's not one of those departures where I was just like, oh, big deal. I thought he's a good player. He would have been nice to have one more year. Stephon Thompson had just played a lot of football in the system, in the scheme they run. And so he was kind of nice as like a 2-deep guy. So you do have to find bodies to make yourself feel good about like 4 or 5 deep at that position. Obviously, you lose Javen Wright too, you know? So there are some guys who are going to have to step up, and you know maybe they're going to have to add another one there too. Vincent Shavers just got a black shirt we saw out in New York City, so he's going to be a huge part in the second level of that defense. But McCullough was he was a big time get for this program, and his dad's a coach at Notre Dame, and so he's got football in the blood and all that stuff. I think he's got connections because his dad coached with the Chiefs. So Terry Braden was there at the same time as his dad was coaching. So he knows him. I'm sure he knows Jamar Mosey. The Mosey effect has been real in this class and in this portal cycle, I feel like.
Yeah, no, it's Nebraska finally managed to crack the code at Kansas City. It had been a long time coming, a lot of trying to get in there and do that. And it's been a good development because I think what you've seen is with the changes in coaching staff that they've had, it feels like just based on who's there, there's fewer connections than there were in the state of Texas. They've bulked up a little bit in Florida, which I think they feel like they've found some things down there that they like. Like they like the makeup of some of those guys that are willing to leave Florida, come to a place like Nebraska, and compete. I mean, they've batted a really high percentage of some of those guys so far early on. And to kind of offset that, you need to do well in your 500-mile radius metro areas like St. Louis, Kansas City. And, the Kansas City development has been, I think, a really important one after striking out for, basically as long as I've been with 24/7. It's been really tough sledding in that area.
I wrote today, it feels like it went from like, if you were to use the needle on the gas tank example, is basically just above the E forever. And I do think like Bill Bush, was trying to push that and stuff and got a little something going. But ever since Jamar Mosey's been on staff, like in a half a year, it's gone from basically the E to you've got 3/4 of a tank now. Like you're feeling pretty good about how you're humming along there. And there's going to be more. Like I know McCullough technically won't be connected as a KC guy, but Dawson Merritt, was like had the eyeballs the other day when it was kind of happening, and they think of him in that way. So another example where that connection I think came in handy.
Anything else portal wise? We can move on quickly.
Well, I will say Justin Rhett's really interesting to me. The DB out of Georgia. You have a similar case, different position, of course, but MJ Sherman was a guy who, got lost in the log jam with all the talent there and had a really nice run at Nebraska for a couple of years. And Rhett's got good size. He could fit into that safety competition, I think, pretty quickly. Has played 2 years. He's only played 4 games, so he's played like 37 defensive snaps. So he's not really experienced, but he's been around obviously the top level of college football. And if he's got a chip on his shoulder, he could be a guy to watch, when you get to the spring. So I thought that was a nice pickup that probably got overshadowed by Sunday's news about McCullough. But we'll see if he can jump right in Justin Rhett and make a move.
Yeah. Well, there's still quite a bit of work left to do. I mean, you're currently in a visit dead period for the portal stuff. That lifts in January. Still a couple weeks before classes get going to get more guys in. You're going to have another cycle in the spring as well, as Nebraska kind of has to add while still cutting guys to get down to 105 by August. So we'll continue to follow that. Like we said, as of tonight. Still a few decisions left out there for guys who were visiting Nebraska over the last couple weeks. We're I guess technically in bowl week now. It kind of it was portal for quite a while, and now we can kind of turn our attention to the bowl game with Nebraska in New York and practicing in the Giants facility today when they arrived. What are you kind of hoping to hear over the next few days as we get to New York and kind of hear from guys? And I guess, how do you kind of align it in your head with like what this game actually means for Nebraska and the trajectory of the program? Because I hear some people saying, it doesn't really matter. We've also bemoaned the fact for almost a decade that Nebraska has not made a bowl game. So there's also that weight to it. But how do you kind of line up everything going into bowl week with what this means for Nebraska?
Whether fans feel this way or not, they've got to build it within the program that every time you step on the field, there's a lot on the line, and it matters if Nebraska loses. Like, it can't just be like, oh, well, like that sort of thing, on to the next one. I feel like it's been that way for way too long. And so you've got some younger players who maybe will see a few more snaps. I don't know that it'll be crazy. I think on the D-line and linebacker spots, because of the portal departures, you're going to see some guys you maybe didn't see as much of. You're going to see a lot more Cam Lenhart and some Keona Davis, even more of perhaps. And like Dylan Parrott's on the 2 deep. He's been on the travel roster though. Dylan Rogers is on the 2 deep at linebacker. So there are going to be some guys who maybe get put out there, but I think you just want to see a group where it really means a lot to go get this win and claim the first winning season since 2016 and sort of build that mentality within those guys who are returning in 25, that every time you step on the field, you expect to win the game. And they have said for the young guys is like the first game of next year. So treat it like that. I mean, even if it's not going in that on that record sheet in the yearbook, you still got to act like it's that type of game, I think. And guys who want to position themselves to be main men in 25 who are coming back, I think, feel like they've got a lot to prove this month and in this game to show, like, when we're going to spring ball, I kind of want my name near in the top line or at least in the second line so I can make my move.
I mean, you essentially have 2 new coordinators. I know Dana's been around for 3 games, so he's the veteran of the 2. But I mean, which side of the ball do you expect that you're going to learn more about, just given all the changes that Nebraska's gone through in the last month?
I think John Butler has the toughest task because he walks into a game where it's his first game wearing that title. So there will be a natural reaction, whether it's fair or not, about how they play. That's going to be the case. And I'm not making excuses for him beforehand. They might go play really well. I wouldn't be surprised if they do. But it has been a tricky prep month when you think about his D-line coach isn't here yet. His DB's coach, Addison Williams, just got here. So you've Phil Simpson just got here. Phil Snowsman just came in. So it's been difficult. Like, Rob Dvorak's been doing double or triple duty in the practices with some position groups. There's some other guys like GAs who have been heavily involved. I wish I could think of all their names right now, but they've done some good work, I think, to try to get guys ready. So it hasn't been an easy assignment for John Butler, but that's the side I'm most intrigued by, just like how it looks with sort of these changing parts. I sort of expect the offense is going to look okay. Like, I feel like they have a little something that was humming along in the last 3 games. They felt a rhythm. You've got Emmett Johnson back. So you can see if he can kind of keep going with what he's been doing. And I think that side of the ball has to feel pretty confident about what they can do, because they were playing that way against Wisconsin. Now, not as much against Iowa at times, but we'll see if they can kind of find the mojo they had against the Badgers.
Yeah, it's going to be the mixing and matching of pieces is going to be kind of fascinating on defense, like you said. I mean, just the bowl week depth chart that came out. I mean, I kind of went through and just crossed off the guys who were there for the Iowa game and who's new now. I mean, it's a completely different looking group on defense in certain parts, and guys are going to have a much larger, snap count and responsibility going into that one. And it's interesting too, because it's going to be, I think it sets up to be a somewhat low scoring game regardless, just because of the styles of play that Boston College is going to try to play with.
Yeah, it feels that way. And it's going to be like a 38-degree day, and on a baseball surface. So, I mean, it's going to be, I think, a little bit of a challenge. I wish the diamond was painted on like the old, Oakland Raiders games when we were kids. Like, they should just do that.
Like guys having to go out of their way to avoid the mound that they didn't quite get shaved down perfectly.
Yeah, that should be a part of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we did a half hour. I think Nebraska's probably going through warm-ups by now, aren't they? Are we close to tip-off in Honolulu?
Yeah, it just got going here, so we'll have to see how Fred's boys can do. That probably would have been the more plush assignment. Not to I'm not complaining about going to New York for this thing, but I wouldn't have minded this Hawaii deal.
Yeah, that'd be all right. It'd be a little bit better situation. You'd appreciate an open air press box in Honolulu a little bit more probably than what we're going to get in New York City. But Brian's going to be in New York. I'll be in New York. We're going to see what the Big Apple has to offer. We're going to see what Nebraska and Boston College can put together in Yankee Stadium. Keep it locked on Husker247 for all of that. All that coverage from New York before the game, after game, and then we'll dive right back into the portal season right after that. Thanks for listening.